Now, the world of cosmology has lost perhaps its brightest star today. Now, physicist and cosmologist Stephen Hawking has passed away at the age of 76 at his home in Cambridge. Now, Stephen Hawking passed away early in the morning today. Now, the cause behind his death is still not known. However, his family has released a statement which reads, and I quote, "He was a great scientist and an extraordinary man whose work and legacy will live on for many years. His courage and his persistence with his brilliance and humour has inspired people across the world." He once said, "It would not be much of a universe if it wasn't home to the people that you love. We will miss him forever," unquote. Now, Stephen Hawking was diagnosed with a motor neuron disease when he was just 21 years old. At that time, doctors had predicted that he'll have perhaps 2 years to live, and he became well known when he wrote the book, A Brief History in Time. Now, the book has sold well over 10 million copies worldwide and has also broken the Guinness Book of World Records for staying on the Sunday Times bestsellers list for over 237 weeks straight. Now, apart from his many accomplishments, Stephen Hawking was known for his sense of humour and also his way of dealing with the disease which had left him wheelchair-bound for practically much of his life. Now, he's perhaps one of the most famous physicists in the world, with many mentions in pop culture as well, and even a movie that's been made on him called The Theory of Everything. All right, now for more on this, we are joined in by Mr. Sanjeev Dhunrandhar, who is an Indian scientist who's joining us from Pune. Mr. Dhunrandhar, this is a big loss for the scientific community. Arguably one of the brightest stars in the world of astrophysics is no more.
So,
Yes, Mr. Sanjeev Dhunrandhar, go ahead.
Yeah. So, I think this is a very big loss, not only to the cosmology, general relativity, and astrophysics in general, but to science itself. I think he was one of the biggest scientists after Einstein, I think.
Absolutely.
To have been, was a contemporary scientist, in the contemporary times. And two of his big contributions, are most, the thing was this singularity theorem. So one of the things was the singularity theorems,
right,
which he was a part of this thing, Hawking, Penrose, and so on. So he did this, he gave this singularity theorems, and that's what told us that generically we can have singularities in the general theory of relativity,
right,
which was the theory of gravity Einstein had given in 1916,
right,
1915 and 16. So, what the importance of that is that since these singularities are formed generically, one would also have black holes generically.
Right.
Earlier, it was thought that the black holes were just mathematical artifacts of symmetry and so on. But since they were formed generically, one could have black holes in astrophysics, in astronomy, and so people started looking for them. And so this was a very important discovery for astrophysics also, the singularity theorems.
Right.
And the second one was the discovery, was the realization that black holes, although classically they are black, black holes are black, nothing can come out.
Right.
Quantum mechanically, they are not like that. They are like a black body and they can radiate. And so a black hole is like a black body. It can radiate, it can evaporate. And that was one of the things which was given in, I think, mid-70s or something like that. And that was one of the biggest discoveries also, because it started a new field of quantum gravity and so on.
Absolutely. And also, Mr. Sanjeev Dhunrandhar, one of the reasons as to why Stephen Hawking was so popular is because he brought those very difficult, abstract mathematical and physical concepts and made them more accessible for the general public. For instance, the theory of general relativity, black holes, now these were difficult concepts of quantum physics which not a lot of people understood, but Stephen Hawking broke it down and communicated with the masses and made them extremely popular.
Yeah, so that is exactly the hallmark of a great scientist. He can explain the most abstract things to the most, it's because they understand things so well that he can make anything abstract or which is to the public, general public, but even to scientists it was quite abstract. And such things also because of his greatness actually. He could make these things very, bring it to the layman basically. So that's exactly his greatness. I mean, it's not a contradiction at all.
Absolutely. And also the fact that, at the age of 21, he was diagnosed with this motor neuron disease, which doctors at that time predicted that he had perhaps only about 2 years to live. But he lived on for over half a century and perhaps contributed in a way that few other scientists have contributed in the 20th century. If you could talk to us a little more about that.
Yeah, I think he was actually, unfortunately, he had a disability. And I have read his book, actually, The Brief History of Time and so on. And I've seen that, right in the beginning, when he was a young man, I think he started experiencing this thing. It's about this, about the disease. But even in spite of the disability, he was able to contribute so much in science and all that. So that's remarkable. It's an extraordinary thing,
And also, the sense of humor that he had, initially when he was asked, what he thought about this disease, he somehow said that he's lived more because he's lived in the shadow of death. That is how he's joked about the fact that he had this rare motor neuron disease. Talk to us also about, how big a loss this is for the scientific community at large. Yeah,
so I think it's a very big loss because he has come up with such revolutionary ideas. Like I said about the evaporation of the black hole. Nobody had thought that the black holes were black. Nothing would come out. But he showed that if you have quantum mechanically, objects such as black holes can radiate. And they behave exactly like a black body. And so they have a temperature and so on. So this was a very big, so he sort of unified the usual thermodynamics with thermodynamics of black holes and so on. So that was a very big contribution that even gravitational fields and so on, you can define things like usual thermodynamical quantities.
Absolutely.
So the new, so if there's quantum theory of gravity, it should explain all these things. So it was a sort of a probe into such theories, I would say.
Absolutely, indeed. Thank you very much, indeed, Mr. Dhurandhar, for having joined us and got us all those updates and insights into this scientist. It's arguably one of the greatest scientists of our times who has passed away. Someone who's inspired generations of young physicists to aspire to be more. Because in many ways, it was his life that had in fact become a sort of an example for so many other youngsters to emulate. And meanwhile, I'm told that we're also joined in by Mr. R.C. Kapoor, who's a professor at the Indian Institute of Astronomy. Mr. Kapoor, thank you very much indeed for joining us. It's a sad day and an extremely tragic day that arguably the greatest scientist of our times is no more, and Stephen Hawking has passed away.
Yes, it's a very sad news to hear. And Stephen Hawking has been a great inspiration for scientists of all generations. He suffered from a disease of the nervous system, and he actually battled all that. And then, in spite of that, he has made among the most fundamental contributions to physics. And in that, the black hole physics has received the greatest contribution from him, possibly after Einstein. And I must say that his works, each one of his papers in the 70s and 80s, led to basically a subject in astrophysics. So I feel very sad that he has passed away, but he leaves behind a great inspiration for everyone, from age 0 to whatever people reach in their ripe life.
Absolutely, and one of the things that he in fact spoke much about is how the disease that came to be symbolized. A lot of people used to watch him on television, and this was this great scientist, a very sharp intellect behind this man who barely could even talk. And he joked about the fact that but for this disease, perhaps he may not have been as popular as he eventually became. But even in the world of science, he was regarded as, as you put it, the man after Einstein, the greatest in the 20th century.
Yes, and then although it's true that he didn't get the Nobel Prize, he deserved it decades ago.
Right.
And his contribution to black hole physics, which has led to great path-breaking studies in this area, will always be remembered. And he is actually on the popular front. He is remembered by his great book, A Brief History of Time, came in 1988. And then even the publisher had told him, every one equation you put into this mathematical equation, the scale comes down. In spite of that, this book has sold tremendously and is very popular among all those who want to enjoy the beauty of science. So we have a rare peep of his own intellect and sense of humor into his works like this.
Absolutely. And Mr. Kapoor, you know, this A Glimpse of Time, the book that he in fact wrote, A Brief History of Time, which he published in 1988, which has sold about 10 million copies. And it's not something that's read just by the scientific community, but also by the general audiences at large. Was it his ability to in fact connect with the common man, you know, not just with the intellectuals, not just with the scientists, but also to connect with the common man and make science, make the abstract concepts of science more accessible? Is that what set him apart as well?
Actually, this book is for the informed layman, and anyway, even for the professional astrophysicist also. And that way, its readership is a very wide in range, and those who do not know much of physics or astronomy also would read around and then want to get a little bit of whatever is there in the Brief History of Time. And actually, it's one of the most wonderful books on cosmology and the frontier area in astrophysics, where we want to understand the origins of the universe and how the stars form, galaxies form, and eventually systems like the solar system form, and finally life emerged on some planet. So this book is a great peep into all this, not too many pages, and I can see that it's only a... in spite of that, people have read it and then kept it as a sort of a kind of souvenir. It's less than 200 pages, if you see, and then in that 200 pages, you get a almost complete picture of the universe and picture of the work that has been done on the origin and development of the universe. And it's quite a wonderful book. I'll recommend that every youngster who has some interest in science should read it.
Absolutely, indeed. And also, Mr. Kapoor, you know, the research which Stephen Hawking did in terms of black holes, it was a very abstract concept in the 70s and 80s. Not too many people actually understood it. But in many ways, he came about and said, look, this is something that is there out there in the universe. There are singularities, points of singularities, and this is essentially what black holes are. If you could talk to us a bit more about Stephen Hawking's contribution to the understanding of black holes in the universe.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, in the area of black hole physics, there are a few personalities who are in the on that axis. You start with Einstein, in between comes S. Subramanian Chandrasekhar, and then, of course, John Wheeler and Stephen Hawking. The concept of black hole, the very name was given by John Wheeler, and of course, Hawking and Penrose were working in the late 60s on various theorems related to black hole concept. Black hole concept has been most abstract concept of the 20th century, and these people have worked on that. It was my own pleasure to have worked on the astrophysical aspects of the black holes for my PhD thesis also, and in fact I have been greatly inspired by the work of all these giants.
Right.
And for example, in the area of black hole, Stephen Hawking gave a black hole area theorem, which meant that the area of surface area of a black hole increases towards the future, which translated into thermodynamics, as it is said that entropy can never decrease, or disorder always increases, because the arrow of time is one directional.
Absolutely.
Apart from that, he gave the concept of micro black holes. Black holes which were sort of in the microgram range was forming at around the time of the just after the Big Bang happened. So those concepts are very mind-boggling, but then in those areas one has to apply quantum mechanics also. So that area is still a frontier area, and his ambition has been that relativity on one side and quantum mechanics on the other side come together and merge into a unified theories of description.
Absolutely.
Of the universe.
Absolutely indeed, Mr. Ramesh Kapoor. Thank you very much indeed for joining us and getting us those insights. Perhaps one of the brightest stars in the scientific community is no more. And let's also now listen in to some excerpts from Stephen Hawking.
Want to report that I think I have solved a major problem in theoretical physics that has been around since I discovered that black holes radiate thermally 30 years ago.
Yet if, as I hope, basic science becomes part of general awareness, what now appear as the paradoxes of quantum theory will seem as just common sense to our children's children. The present exponential growth cannot continue indefinitely. However, to a large extent, we shall have to rely on mathematical beauty and consistency to find the ultimate theory of everything. I think the human race has no future if it doesn't go into space. I therefore want to encourage public interest in space. I have long wanted to go into space, and a zero-gravity flight is the first step towards space travel. As you can imagine, I am very excited. I have been wheelchair-bound for almost 4 decades, and the chance to float free in zero-G will be wonderful.